Stepdad moved his entitled daughter into my new house and changed the locks. When I called the cops, despite my mom's trauma, she disowned me for her new family. Hi guys. I, 32F, recently bought a house of my own. A couple of days ago, I invited all my family and friends over for a housewarming party. I also invited my parents, but I made sure to mention that only they were invited so that my mother wouldn't bring her new family along. My parents have been separated for almost 15 years. Nearly 2 years ago, my mother remarried Carson. Carson has a 22-year-old daughter, Vanessa, from a previous marriage. Vanessa is spoiled, entitled, and embodies everything that I hate. Carson isn't exactly enjoyable to be around either, and it's pretty clear that they don't like me. So, I obviously didn't want them at my housewarming party because it was an important event for me to. Despite my wishes, my mother brought them along, and when I brought it up with her, she told me she wanted me to bond with her new family and that it would mean the world to her if we could all just get along. I didn't say much to her that day because I didn't want to cause a scene at my own party and decided to let it slide, thinking I would deal with it later. However, during the party, Vanessa began talking badly about my house to my friends, saying she could afford a better house on her salary, which was almost half of mine. That annoyed me, and I told her she was welcome to buy her own house, as I was sure her parents would appreciate their 22-year-old daughter finally moving out of their basement. My response earned a lot of laughs, and Vanessa went completely red in the face, clearly embarrassed. But she started it, so I didn't really feel too bad. With a lot of guests to attend to, I left her alone and went on to talk to other people. After the party ended, my mother lingered even after everyone had left, including Carson and Vanessa. I decided to confront her and told her that I didn't want her new family around. I was in my 30s and old enough to know the kind of people I wanted around me, and they weren't it. Her husband and stepdaughter were unpleasant and disrespectful to me. My mother insisted I give them a chance, and then asked if Vanessa could move in with me for a while since her new workplace was closer to my place than theirs. She said that spending quality time together would help me come to like Vanessa. I shot the idea down instantly. I could hardly tolerate Vanessa for an evening, let alone imagine having to deal with her for an entire day, or even more. She was bratty and lacked manners, and I definitely didn't want her around, especially not in my home, which was supposed to be my safe space. My mother tried to argue, but I told her it wasn't going to happen, so she might as well save her breath. She left in a huff, and I didn't bother talking to her afterward because there was no way I would give in to her ridiculous demands. Then, yesterday, something even crazier happened. I received a notification from my alarm company saying that my house had been broken into, so I immediately rushed back home from work, only to find the locks had been changed and I couldn't get in. I could hear people inside, and was about to call the cops when Carson opened the door and told me I needed to stay out because it was my punishment. I was confused and asked what exactly I was being punished for. He told me he wasn't going to refresh my memory and that I had to figure it out myself. He then gave me a hint, reminding me of the time I had disrespected Vanessa at my housewarming party. He said that because I hadn't agreed to his request, they were now taking over my house. He claimed I had the chance to allow it peacefully, but I had refused and sent my mother home upset, and now I had to deal with the consequences. I laughed in his face and told him I was going to call the police and make sure he and Vanessa were thrown out because they had no right to take over my house as if it was a game. Things became even more frustrating when he said he knew I wouldn't do anything because it would upset my mother, who had a negative history with the police and wouldn't forgive me for involving them. My mother had a traumatic past involving law enforcement, which caused her to dislike even the idea of police involvement, even if a crime was being committed. I knew she wouldn't forgive me if I called the police, but there was no other option. Carson even had the audacity to say that Vanessa deserved to live in my house more than I did. He left me standing on the porch, slamming the door in my face. I realized then that I had no choice but to call the police. Within an hour, the police arrived and had them evicted from my property, which was fortunate since Vanessa had already started unpacking. Carson was in shock. He hadn't expected me to call the cops, considering my mother's past experiences. I knew my mother wouldn't be happy, but I had no other choice. She called me about an hour later. She wasn't angry. She just sounded extremely disappointed, which was almost worse. She told me that if I really didn't want Vanessa to stay, I could have called her and she would have stopped it. She said she couldn't forgive me for having the police evict them so nastily and told me she would never speak to me again. It broke my heart to hear how sad she was. My mother is usually all for the drama, but this time, she was genuinely disappointed, and it hurt me deeply. I apologized even though I didn't think I was at fault, but she still hung up on me and blocked my number. I feel awful about what happened, but I don't see any other way I could have handled it. I had to get Carson and Vanessa out of my house, and the police were my last resort. I understand my mother's trauma and why this is difficult for her, but I also feel like she's being unfair and not considering my perspective. I didn't intend to hurt her or bring up her trauma. It just happened. If she wants to blame someone, shouldn't it be her husband and stepdaughter for putting me in this position? I feel terrible. I can't share what happened with my mother here, as it's not my story to tell, but I still need to know if I should apologize to her or not. Am I the jerk for calling the cops on my stepdad and stepsister despite my mom's bad experience with police? Okay, I didn't want to discuss this without my mother's consent, but since this is anonymous, I think it's important to explain why my mother has this trauma. About 15 years ago, my parents broke up and my mom started dating a cop, her first boyfriend after the split. He was the most toxic person imaginable, and it's a miracle he managed to keep my mom around for more than 2 years. He constantly put her down, shattered her self-esteem, and isolated her from everyone in her life. While she was with him, she'd only see me once or twice a month, and even then, she seemed distant. After about a year, he made her stop seeing anyone from her past, as he was jealous and insecure. He wanted her to leave her old life behind. The relationship finally ended when he ran away with a coworker, leaving nothing but a letter saying he'd been having an affair for 8 months. My mother was severely depressed for nearly a year, and something in her changed. She developed a fear of police officers and couldn't trust them. It was bad enough that when she lost her purse, she refused to report it. That's how deeply rooted her trauma is. Knowing this, I realize how hurt she must have been when she learned I called the police. It was the one thing she could never forgive, and Carson and Vanessa pushed me to do it. I'm beginning to think they planned this to turn my mother against me, but there's no way to prove it. All I remember is that Carson seemed a little shocked when the cops arrived, but Vanessa wasn't fazed at all. There's nothing I can do about it now. All I can do is hope my mother comes around. If she doesn't, I'll be okay, knowing I tried my best to keep the peace, but her new family just wouldn't let it happen. Now it's her choice who she wants to stick with. My mother and I haven't spoken in almost 2 weeks since the incident. Vanessa seems to be happy with how things turned out, judging by her social media. I don't follow her, but a friend sent me a photo she posted of herself, Carson, and my mother at the beach with a caption, "Just the fam, recovering." I don't understand what she thinks she's recovering from because, as far as I'm concerned, I was the one who went through the traumatic experience. I talked to my dad about it, and he thinks I did the right thing. What else could I have done? He told me that before my housewarming party, my mother had approached him, asking if he knew of any affordable places for Vanessa to rent close to her workplace. My dad is a real estate agent, but he mainly deals with houses being sold, not rentals, so he told her he couldn't help unless she wanted to buy Vanessa a place. My mother said she would if she could, but Carson didn't want to spend that kind of money on a place for a temporary job, which made sense. It upset me because my mother was the same person who refused to help me with college tuition, telling me to be independent. But for Vanessa, she's willing to make all these allowances. It stings that she has a better relationship with Vanessa than she does with me. Even the beach trip hurts. My mom always insisted she didn't like beaches, and we always went to the hills or woods for vacations. I love the beach, but with her, I always had to compromise. Now she's willing to go for Vanessa, but never for me. I didn't think Vanessa's post would bother me so much, but it really did. It feels like Vanessa has the family I never had. I think I need to talk to my mom when she returns. Even if it means ending things, we need to talk at least for one last time. I asked a friend to let me know when Vanessa returned from vacation, and I found out yesterday. I'm not sure how I'm going to bring this up with my mom, but I know I need to do it. She blocked me on social media, but my number isn't blocked, so I guess I'll have to call her. It's going to be hard because we haven't spoken in weeks, and we aren't on good terms. My dad thinks I should give it a few more days, but I think now's the time. She's probably in a good mood after the vacation, so maybe she'll answer. Honestly, I just want to do this while I feel brave. It's been a day since I learned she's back, but I feel like throwing up at the thought of her not answering my call. If she doesn't, I don't know what I'll do. We've never had the best relationship, but it was still something. If I lose that, I don't know what I'll do. I finally called my mother, and we spoke for about half an hour. She told me she wanted to meet in person after I was done talking. It was mostly me doing the talking while she listened. It was nerve-wracking telling her everything I thought of her as a mother and talking about everything I mentioned in my updates. She needed to hear it. She didn't say much in response, but said she understood where I was coming from and wished she'd been a better mother the first time around. I didn't understand what she meant, and I didn't ask because I wanted to save something for our meeting tomorrow. We're meeting for lunch, and I know it's going to be tense and awkward. Even if she's not, I will be. Every time we speak, I feel like something will go wrong, and I've been right so far. I hope I'm wrong this time. Hi, I'm on my way home from lunch. I can't go back to work. I just feel like going to bed after some wine. Our talk didn't go as planned, though it didn't go badly. We sorted things out, but it felt like a breakup. My mother dumped me for her stepdaughter, whom I hate. We hugged at first, and it was nice. But once we started talking, all the jealousy I'd kept bottled up came out. I told her I wished she'd been the mom to me that she was to Vanessa. It didn't make sense. Vanessa's an adult, and I was a teenager when I needed my mom. I told her I felt like I deserved better treatment from her in the past, and it was disappointing seeing her become this person for her new family. I struggled to accept it because she should have been that person for us. I'm in my 30s now, but it still feels like a younger version of me needed my mom to be there.